The Icons of Real Estate Podcast. Are you ready to learn the proven money-making secrets from top-producing Icon agents? Ready to skyrocket your business? This podcast is for you. Tune in every week with your host, Tomasz Fonseca, and find out how to implement proven strategies to 10 times your business, from $3 million to $30 million in just 12 months. Brought to you by the Masters at Real Estate Marketing, Ardor SEO.
And welcome to the Icons of Real Estate. I'm your host, Tim Calloway. We have a very special guest for you today, Kathy Fettke. Kathy specializes in teaching people how to build multi-million-dollar real estate portfolios through creative financing and planning. She's also the author of a #1 bestseller, Retire Rich with Rentals, which I think all of us would like to hear about that. She's also often a guest expert on such media as CNN, CNBC, Fox News, NPR, and CBS MarketWatch. Kathy, welcome to the show. How are you?
Wonderful. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, let's dive right into it. I mean, how did you get started? Where did you get started? And how did you get to where you are today with the Real Wealth Network?
Well, it really was all by accident, I guess you could say. I think everybody has heard that you can make money in real estate. I know for us, for my husband and I, we thought we had to have money first, that we had to be wealthy first, and we had to save lots and lots of money to get to a place where we could invest in real estate. So we just, were married by 30 and didn't have the money to do that. So instead we went the traditional way. We had a financial planner who showed us how to create buckets, 10% for emergency, 10% for the stock market, 10% for fun and, stuff you want to do. And that, you should really be living on 50% of your income, after you pay taxes and everything. Sure. That's what we did. And we thought we were really doing great. My husband had just come out with a book called Extreme Success. He was one of the top business coaches in the country and was touring around the country with his book, getting on all kinds of media. We just bought a 4,000 square foot home, 6-bedroom home that was bigger than we probably should have bought. But it was my dream house and, 2 little kids. So, really, I was living the dream. On that media tour for his book, he noticed a freckle. Rich had been a bodybuilder. Okay. I had many arguments about whether he should be in those tanning beds or not. And he's like, oh, no, they've done tests. Anyway, bottom line is he got melanoma. After going to the doctor, he checked out the freckle. And if you don't know, it's a deadly skin cancer. Moves quickly. Yeah, if you don't find it right away and get it, it will get into all your organs and you don't have much time. So the doctor was very concerned, did a bunch of tests. It looked like it had spread to the liver. And that was the day Rich came home and he says, I've got 6 months. So that was a traumatic day. Rich is healthy today, 20 years later. So
fantastic. That's great.
That's the good news. That's the good news. But at the time, we didn't know. And it's just amazing how you can go from the top of the world to hell in a matter of minutes. We didn't know what to do. We blew through our savings, all that emergency fund that we were setting aside. Right. By the time, you pay medical bills, you got to find out what your insurance is really covering. Turns out they weren't covering very much. We didn't want Rich to have to work during the 6 months of his life. So, you blow through 10% really fast. I did not want to get a full-time job and be away from him and be away from our 2 kids. I had to figure out what to do and how to get him off the treadmill. So my background was in broadcasting. I had a degree at San Francisco State. I worked in CNN and KTVU, Fox News, and ABC7 in San Francisco. And I quit all of that to be a mom. But I had this little weekend gig, little radio show. It was just fun. It just kind of kept me in the business. And Rich could watch the kids on Saturday mornings when I went in. But I thought, well, maybe I can use this platform to figure out how, if there's a way for me to be home with my family and still make money. It's like, well, that would be a dream. And I just started interviewing people. I completely turned the topic to how to make money. And then that kind of led me to, oh, like there's this thing called passive income. Well, what's that? How do you do it? And I started finding people I could interview who did it. And, some did it through businesses, laundromats, vending machines, there's all kinds of ways to do it.
Right.
And of course, the easiest perhaps is real estate. So I just started to interview person after person after person to find out. And my mind expanded, just, like
Right.
stuff we've never been taught, never heard, changed my life.
Yeah, when I was young, they used to call it mailbox money.
Yeah.
It's you go check the mailbox and there's the check. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Most of us aren't taught mailbox money. We're taught you go work 8 hours a day, maybe 10,
Right.
work 12 hours if you really want to get ahead. It's
Exchange your time for someone else's presumption of what you're worth, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what you go to school for. Even today, my kids, went to college and they said, gee, mom, everybody in college is just telling me how to be a good employee. I don't want to be an employee.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think anyone ever grew up. It's kind of interesting. I talk to multiple realtors and real estate investors and people in the real estate market every day. And both of them say both sides of the coin. I never grew up saying, hey, I want to be a realtor or a real estate investor, but I also didn't grow up saying, hey, I want someone to tell me my worth. Right.
Yeah.
So you work with and tell me, who's your audience? Who are your clients? Who is it you work with?
Well, at first it just started with, it was for me. Like I wanted to figure out this secret, and people were so willing to share it. I couldn't believe it. And I was lucky enough to end up bringing on a sponsor for my show who was a mortgage broker.
Okay.
And I thought, boy, how am I going to make business for this sponsor? He was paying a lot. It was really helping with our financial situation at the time to bring in money. It's like, how can I give him what he wants so he stays as my sponsor?
Right.
So yeah. So
I
like,
need that
okay,
money.
I need that money, and like mortgages are boring. So if I just like, hey, it's 7% rate today. I mean, so I thought,
You said that. I didn't. Mortgages are boring. I didn't say that either.
like, this is the worst. What am I going to do? And then I thought, oh, I'll just interview his clients, and we'll just find out what they're doing with these mortgages. And one after the other, they were borrowing money to fix and flip. They were borrowing money to buy and hold, to what they call burn now, do the renovation, refi, get all your money back.
Right.
There were so many ways that people were making money that my audience just grew like wildfire, which is really not a term we should use in California, but
Right.
it grew so fast. And then people started calling saying, I want a mortgage, give me a mortgage. And so it turned out the sponsor had more business he could handle. So he said, go get your real estate license and take some of these mortgages. So I did. I got my license the next month. I was suddenly a mortgage broker. That taught me even more about leverage. And at the time, it was the crazy time to be a mortgage broker. It was 2005. So I could give a loan to anyone. There was no verification needed.
Right.
I would have people come in. There'd be stacks of flyers on my desk saying, oh, we'll lend you up to $5 million NINA loan. Like, what's a NINA loan? No income, no assets needed.
Right.
Like, well, that sounds like a bad idea.
It was a horrible idea.
I walked into this business like, who are these people? Like,
yeah.
We don't need any verification that you could pay this loan back. What?
Are they just printing this money and handing it out? Is there a line I have to stand in? Yeah,
it was
a crazy time. Yeah. Of course, we all felt the wrath a few years later. But so tell me about that. So the Real Wealth Network and would you call them students or
no.
Okay.
It was more like people were following along my journey, basically, of discovery, and what I was learning, they were learning, and together, me and my audience were growing.
Okay.
And as we were all learning these new things, then I became a mortgage broker, and suddenly I was busy helping people with loans, and it was then that I would have people come to me and put all of their finances out and say, help me. I would have millionaires come and say, what should I do? And I would say, why are you asking me? I'm like
Right.
new to this business. I didn't say that, but I thought, oh my gosh, there's a real need. People don't know what to do. They
Yeah.
don't know what to do with their money. So again, I just use this platform to help me and my listeners figure out what to do. Because the only thing we were really being taught was what our financial planners were telling us.
Sure.
And so it was around 2005 that I was lucky enough to have Robert Kiyosaki on my show, The Real Wealth Show.
Hmm.
And if you know, the Rich Dad Poor Dad author,
Right.
he's
A must
just
read. Yeah.
a must read. And he came on and explained, as I knew, that when you give somebody a loan that they have shown no proof they can pay back, and they've shown evidence that they don't pay back their loans. I mean, these were like subprime loans. It was like
Right.
crazy times. But, they had proven that they don't pay their loans. So, Kiyosaki's like, this is going to blow up. These prices have gone up so much because of these loans that anyone can get a loan, no money down. And you didn't even have to make the full payment, only a portion of the payment. So
Right.
prices kept getting higher because payments kept getting lower artificially. So it was just obvious, but nobody could see it. It was in plain sight, but even executives on Wall Street couldn't see it. And even people in the industry, presidents of National Association of Realtors,
Right.
couldn't see it. And here was Kiyosaki on my little show in San Francisco who could. So as a result, we were able to guide people through what ended up being the worst storm in real estate since the Great
Right.
Depression.
Right.
He explained, you got to get out of the way of the storm. So sell everything in these high-priced, overpriced markets where values have doubled in the last couple of years. That's not sustainable. That's not healthy. It's not going to last. And he said, get into markets that are solid, where there's legitimate job growth, population growth, and prices in line with that the affordability is there, that people can afford to live. He said, that's a solid market because you've got the growth, but prices are in line. So it only has one
Right.
way to go, which is up, cash flow and then appreciation. So that made sense to me. He said he was selling all of his California property and cashing it in at the peak and buying in Texas. And
Yeah.
today you would, no, everybody knows Texas is a hot market, but
Sure.
back then nobody knew it. And it was like people made comments like this, that's the stupidest advice we've ever heard. And nothing ever happens in Texas. And, why that's it. Like, why would anyone, they have nothing but land there. The prices will never go up. That was what we would hear, but it made sense to me. So I jumped on a plane, went to Dallas, where was the highest job growth in the country.
Mhm.
And yet prices were still, the average home price was $150,000, which I think was
Isn't that crazy?
145.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I
So
lived
to
there at
me-
the time.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I lived in Frisco, Texas.
Frisco, that was
Yeah.
booming.
Yeah,
Booming.
we lived there, believe it or not, from 98 till about 2009.
Yeah.
So over a decade. But I lived in Dallas the whole time. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
It was
Um,
crazy
it was like a
growth.
cocoon, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just we're all kind of sitting there going, what's going on around the rest of the United States? And
Yeah.
little old Dallas, which is not little old Dallas, but
Yeah.
and
Unaffected. Unaffected.
yeah,
It was
unaffected.
it was crazy. So because I sort of had this insider information, and it made sense, coming from California where the average home price was, 5 or 600,000 compared
Right.
to 140,000,
Mhm.
where the rents were the same. So you
Yeah.
could buy a $600,000 house in California and get $1,200 rent, or you could go to Texas and buy 100, like it just
Right.
made sense. So, and I could get no money down loans at the time, unlimited investor loans.
Crazy.
So
Wow.
I bought 5. I just went to 5 different builders and said, I'll take one, and found really great property managers, and I'm okay property managers. They've gotten better over time. Back then it was just mom and pops. They've definitely improved in the
Sure.
last 15 years, but good enough property managers, and basically like blew the minds of people on my show when I came home and explained what I did. And suddenly our phones were ringing off the hook again of people saying, I want that. I want to sell my $600,000 property that rents for $1,200 and buy
Yeah.
what you just bought.
I'm out.
Great. Yeah. So that's really how it started, is I just shared what I was doing with people who wanted to do it. And that became the Real Wealth Network, is,
Wow.
bringing these people I was working with and had tested. I tested out property managers, changed some, went to better ones, negotiated, said, hey, if I'm going to send you 20 people, you better take care of them.
Yeah.
And that gave our group, our investor group, more power, because it's like, hey, you don't want to mistreat anyone here, because we'll just pull the whole list. And that group of 20 turned into 100 and turned into 1,000 and just kept growing, where we were just helping them find good areas to buy. I ended up I switched to the real estate side. I stopped doing mortgages and just went on the real estate side and worked with agents on a broker to broker sort of pay. So the client never had to pay anything. It was just the broker had to pay me for bringing clients. And that's been the business model ever since, of going out, venturing out, testing markets, testing teams, and then sharing that with our investor group.
Wow. You make it sound so simple.
Oh, it wasn't. I got burned a million times.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
embarrassed to say that. That's why I'm a big believer in buy and hold, and
Yeah.
buy and hold out of state. But I've also learned all the ways you can get burned, and
Yeah.
that this is a business that doesn't care about, like there's people that can shake your hand and look you in the eye and lie all day long, take your
Chew
money
you
and
up
run.
and spit you out, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's insane. So this is kind of a two-pronged question. They go hand in hand. We were talking about, pre-2008, things like that. Give me a comparison of how you feel about today. I know one of the steps in your process is we just talked about it a little bit, is choosing an investment. So I guess as I'm hearing your story and I'm thinking about it, tell me how you feel about 2022 versus 2006, and when it comes to choosing that investment. Has it changed? Is your outlook on things different? You know, what do you foresee in what's out there?
The funny thing is, it hasn't changed. The times that I veered from what I know to be the fundamentals is when I've made mistakes. But if I stick with that philosophy of go where the jobs are, go where the population growth is, and where prices have not overinflated, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay, because when there's a lot of people, a large pool of renters in an area where those renters can afford to have a good life, they can afford a home, and they can afford food and shelter,
Right.
all the things you need. That's gonna work out, versus the cyclical markets where you can make a ton of money. Hey, if you bought real estate in California in 2010, 11, 12, 13, I mean, you made a lot of money. You made a ton of money if you held it to today. But if you time it wrong, it can hurt a lot. So the similarities I see, obviously, are that some markets just went haywire, and it's such a human thing that when you see prices going up and accelerating, people want to jump in, not realizing that there's an end to that can't last forever. Even just this year, experts that I know were saying, I got to get into the Austin market or the Boise market, and
Right.
I'm thinking, that it just went up 40%, right?
Right.
Do you think you're getting a bargain? And that was the same thing back in when, Phoenix went up 40% in
Sure.
2004,
Right.
and then it did it again. It's like, that's not going to repeat. You missed it. Sadly, you missed it. If it already went up 40%, it's over.
Right.
And good for the people who took advantage. But those cities are the ones that are pulling back now, because the frenzy is over. So don't go into a market that's already popped. You want to be there first. You want to be the one who sees it coming. And just like Kiyosaki, who can look at the metrics and say, this area is where the demographics are moving. It may not happen tomorrow, it may not happen next year, but at some point, this area is going to grow and my property is going to be worth more. But in the meantime, it's cash flowing. The people can afford to live there. And so the comparison is, there's certain markets that got overheated, good for the people who got in early, bad for the people who bought over the past year, because they're going to see some losses.
Sure.
But if they hold long enough, it'll be fine. It's just that, again, when we're seeing the pullback, that it's just really the people in the past year that are going to be affected, not really people before that.
Gotcha. Got you. So
Yeah.
tell me, when someone joins your network, how do most people want to generally look within their sphere of influence? Say be it Southern California or where I'm at, Southeast Florida, which both areas have had spikes, in home prices, things of that nature. Or is this really a national viewpoint, and you're saying, or your group is doing their due diligence and saying, no, it's not Boise, but it's Cheyenne, or wherever. I'm making up
Yeah.
a city, but is
We
it
become more
a national
national.
approach? Go ahead.
Yeah, we used to be really just a Northern California group.
Right.
Then Rich and I moved to Southern California, and then we opened an office here.
Mhm.
And then my show just kind of took off, the podcast, the
Mhm.
Real Wealth Show, and it's been international for over 15 years. So
Wow.
we really have people from all over the world, all over the country. And so it's a practice of, hearing what our members have to say, where they're investing, gathering information. We have so many boots on the street to tell us what's going on, where jobs are moving. Right now, I'm starting a single family fund because I don't know if you know, the Biden just passed I forget how much, it's like $64 billion or something to invest in chips, having chip manufacturing in the US. And we're following where that manufacturing is going, and buying in those areas. So it's always exciting to just find out, where is the money going, where are the jobs going, where's the infrastructure growth, and let's get in around that. And you're kind of going to be fine if you know that there's a bunch of growth happening in an area. Just sit, you buy, hold, sit, and wait,
Right. It's
So that's what we're doing.
wash, rinse, repeat, if you
Yeah.
and stick to a methodology. And I'm agreeing with you. Stick to a methodology, and don't be what is it, what, a dog wagging the tail or whatever it is, chasing its tail, where they're just going in circles and following everybody else and saying, well, that's where the money's being made, I need to jump in, as you said, a year, 2 years later. And it's, they folks have to do their due diligence, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it takes real work, and networks like yours seem to be, one of the best ways to keep that, I guess, your ear to the ground, and see where things are
Yeah.
moving.
Yeah, we're constantly educating people. We're constantly learning, interviewing, and we do have boots on the street all across the country telling us what's going on in those markets. And that's why we're doing the single family fund in this one area where those, where those new tech labs are going to be, the chip manufacturers, because there's a lot of people who don't really necessarily want to do it themselves. They would just rather have someone else, be like totally passive. Owning real estate is really not passive, even though it feels like passive income. There's still work involved. So there's a lot of people who are like, you know what, I'm a pro football player. I'm a, tech person. I don't have time to do any of it. And so we have the fund that, it's a 506c, so I can talk about it, but so we do a lot of that now. And looking at probably a lot of opportunity coming. We know that the Federal Reserve controls the levers of the economy. It's very manipulated. We do not have a free market economy, as much as people might think this is the United States of America, free market. It's not. It's manipulated. And it's really manipulated by the Fed, raising and lowering interest rates. And then, of course, buying mortgage-backed securities and, all the stuff that they do. So over the last 2.5 years, we know that they flooded the market with 50% more, 40 to 50% more cash circulating than before the pandemic. That's what created this frenzy, is the Fed overstimulating the economy from COVID, to a point where they were still buying mortgage-backed securities to keep mortgage interest rates low up until March of this year, when prices had already gone up 20% nationwide. Why are you stimulating a housing market that is stimulated?
It's already hot. Yeah. Then you get the overstimulation, and that's when people get burned.
That's when, and it had nothing to do with natural market dynamics. It had everything to do with 50% more of the money in circulation in 2 years, obviously it's going to land somewhere, and it lands in real estate and drives prices up. So then the Fed was like, oh, oops, inflation, as if they didn't know that would be the result. And now they're pulling it back out, and pulling it back out fast. Like I surf here in Malibu, and when you have tide changes that are dramatic, it's kind of scary, because you'll be out, surfing, and you're like, whoa, all of a sudden it's low tide. How do I get back in? There's all these rocks. Or, oh, it just changed so quickly. Now it's high tide and now there's no beach, and I'm going to like surf into a house when I get back. Like, if it happens slowly, you can kind of like prepare. But when it's fast, and we've had what they call king tides, and it's like woof, fast. That's what the Fed did. They just like high tide, like they threw money in, and they're like, oops, and now they're pulling it back out, and it's really confusing. So that's what we're in there. They're pulling money out of the system now that they put in, and they have a full intention of slowing down the economy in hopes of creating a recession that would bring inflation under control.
And those are the two key words, recession, inflation. Which is it? Which way are we going? And you had that king tide, or that tsunami of the housing market. And unfortunately, and I come from, for 30 years from the investment side. I used to bundle REITs for Bear Stearns, Real Estate Investment Trust. And then, I've been, since 2008, I've been helping realtors and investors with things like this in marketing. And I tell them the same holds true in real estate as it does equity markets. And it's not, and a lot of folks say what goes up must come down, and that's not necessarily true. It is true. Like, it will happen, but you have to look at the indicators, all the indicators you just talked about. When they're in place, you need to get out of the way. And I think it's very tumultuous. And I loved your analogy of the tide. That I live on the coast as well, different coast, but it's the same thing. You just, if you don't get out of the way of it, it's going to take you out, or it's going to slam you into those rocks.
That's it. You better pay attention. You're going to be a victim otherwise. And and when the tide shifts are that dramatic, we've had houses just go out to sea, because and that's what we're dealing with. So there will be damage. The Fed is trying to create that. So you just have to make sure you're really well positioned for this storm. And I can tell you from our experience of going through the Great Recession, the biggest housing crash since the Great Depression, and COVID, where that was an incredibly scary time to own real estate. It's like, oh my gosh, are we going to be able to even evict people? Are they like, how are we going to get through this? Both times I was shocked that our strategy of just staying out of those hot markets, just being in these linear markets where it's just stable, there's jobs, steady job growth, steady population growth, but the prices don't go out of whack, that it just weathers the storm. In 2009, when the world was falling apart, our property stayed rented. Rents went up. Even if prices went down, which they didn't because we bought so cheap, I wouldn't care, because I was only in it for the cash flow. So who cares what the asset value is? I'm not selling. With COVID, it was a different scenario. Like, oh my gosh, is the government going to regulate whether I could get paid or not? And I still have to pay this mortgage. It was really a scary time, but the opposite happened, where all of a sudden you saw it. It was like there was a pause. Everybody's looking around, freaking out. And then it was like, bam, and boom. Calling all of our property managers, hey, are we going to be okay? We've got thousands of investors,
Wow, you answered your phone. This is great.
I know. Are my thousands of investors at Real Wealth going to get their income? And they're like, you wouldn't believe, we've got people out the door lining up, trying to rent these things. We're busier than ever. It's like, what? Because people were leaving apartments and wanting to live in single family homes, and have a yard and a place to hang out if you're going to be stuck at home. So we were busier than ever in such a crazy time. So it's just confirmation that, we're going into changing times, but this is a solid investment if you do it right. But you got to do it right.
So people who want to join the real estate network, the Real Wealth Network, I saw your website. Is that how folks are getting in touch with you? Is that how they're joining and becoming a member?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
contacting you, or how would they get in touch? Just go to the website?
Realwealth.com is our
Okay.
website. And you can just join. It's free. Lots of free education there and a referral to our different teams nationwide. You don't have to pay to work with them. They just pay us out of their broker commission.
Okay.
And so, no pricing there. And then the Real Wealth Show is my podcast. And then if anyone's interested in our rental fund, it's growdevelopments.com.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, Kathy, it's been wonderful having you on the show. I mean, a wealth of information, and I'll tell you, just sounds like some solid advice that everybody needs to take heed one way or another. And slow and steady wins the race. And as you said, keeping that ear to the ground, boots on the ground, and paying attention to what's going on and doing your due diligence is the way to avoid the tsunami, I believe.
Yeah.
I'll let you have the last word. And I thank you for being on the show. Any last thoughts or?
Just if you're new to investing, be sure to get lots of education. If there's any fear, it's maybe because you haven't learned enough. There's so
Right.
much free education out there. I have a book called Retire Rich with Rentals. I think you mentioned it.
I did.
That really goes step by step through so many good books out there. And obviously, if they're listening to you, they're, educating. But the more you know, then the easier it is to navigate any economy.
There you go. Great advice. And Kathy, thanks for being on the show. I look forward to talking to you again sometime.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Have a great day.
You too.